Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Gary Talks. When we're first introduced to entertainment as children, be it in TV or movies or even music, a lot of times it's in the form of animation, cartoons, animated movies. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I've got some very special guests lined up. From Kung Fu Panda 4, Jack Black. From Despicable Me 4, Steve Carell. And the supervising producer of X-Men 97, Jay Castorina. But before we get to ranking my top 5 favorite animated movies, let's talk to the star of a current hit animated movie in theaters right now. That movie is Kung Fu Panda 4, and it's the voice of Po himself, Jack Black. Thanks for being on the show. For anyone who hasn't seen it, can you describe the story of Kung Fu Panda 4?
In a nutshell, he's got to face his most fierce opponent so far, the chameleon. A creature that can recreate any one of the demons of his past, and even himself. And he also makes a friend along the way. He couldn't have succeeded without this new friend. A ragamuffin from the streets. She's a scraper, a scrapper, a survivor. Shen.
For a minute there, I thought you were going to break into song. What was it like whenever you heard that they were thinking about making a 4th movie in this franchise?
I was like, yes! Because it had been a long time, and I didn't know if that was ever going to happen again. I thought maybe that ship had sailed. And I'd always kind of secretly hoped there'd be some more adventures. Because, once you've had a taste of adventure, and you've been on a magnificent journey, you always dream about one more. Just want to get out there one more time. Want to kick that butt one more time.
Well, I'm glad you got the chance. Dude, people love Po. I know I do, but why do you think he's so popular?
Po's got an innocence about him that's kind of fun and ridiculous and embarrassing, and people can relate to that because everyone's got a little Po inside of them, a little part of them that doesn't know the right thing to say or do in any situation, that feels a little outside of the norm, and you kind of root for him in that way, and I think that's why he connected with so many people.
Well, this episode of Gary Talks is completely dedicated to animation. What do you think makes animated movies so special?
We've got the best animators in the world, and I was so blown away when I started seeing, short sections of the movie coming together, and they really don't get enough credit. I get too much credit as the voice of Po, but those magicians in the art studio making these beautiful backgrounds and fight scenes that are really hypnotic. I can't wait for audiences to see, the latest in this artistry and technology.
Well, it's great to talk to you, Jack. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks a million for doing what you do.
And now let's get into my top 5 animated movies. Like I said earlier, a lot of times the very first movie that we see in the theater on the big screen as a kid is an animated movie. Sure, for some of us, maybe it's a Star Wars movie or a Marvel movie if we're younger. But I'd still guess for a lot of us, especially in my age range, that very first movie that mom and dad took you to was an animated movie. And for me, that's no different. So the first movie I ever saw on the big screen comes in at number 5 for me. And that movie is Jungle Book.
Kaa! It's you!
Yes, man cub. So nice to see you again.
The Jungle Book is a timeless classic that has enchanted generations of viewers with its memorable characters and catchy tunes. The film follows Mowgli, a young boy raised by wolves in the jungle, as he embarks on a journey of self-discovery. Along the way, he encounters a colorful cast of characters including the laid-back Baloo the bear and the sinister Shere Khan. The animation is beautifully crafted, and the songs such as The Bare Necessities and I Want to Be Like You are absolute gems. Yeah, I'm sure nostalgia colors my perception a little, and maybe it's not actually a top 5 animated movie, but it will always have a special place in my heart. There are so many different types of animation. You've got traditional hand-drawn animation like Jungle Book is. You've got computer animation. You've got stop-motion animation. There are so many different types and styles, and a lot of them are mixed together, part hand-drawn, part computer, that sort of thing. Because there are so many different styles, I try not to let that affect my judgment when ranking these movies. I try to look at story, at plot, at music, the voice acting, that sort of thing. But there's one movie that the animation style was so amazing it blew me away. And I think this might be the best looking animated movie ever made. Coming in at number 4 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
My name is Peter Parker. I was bitten by a radioactive spider. And for 10 years, I've been the one and only Spider-Man.
The most recent film on my list, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, is a groundbreaking animated film that brings the beloved superhero to life in a whole new way. The film follows the story of Miles Morales, a teenager who was bitten by a radioactive spider and gained spider-like abilities. As he struggles to control his newfound powers, he discovers that there are other versions of Spider-Man from different dimensions who have also been brought to his world. Together, they must work to stop a threat that could destroy all their realities. The animation in the film is stunning, with a unique style that blends traditional hand-drawn animation with computer-generated imagery. But at its heart, Into the Spider-Verse is a story about the power of friendship, family, and believing in yourself. Now we're going to go from a movie that was pushing the boundaries of what computer animation is to a movie that grabbed the nostalgia of hand-drawn animation. At a time when the only movies people wanted to see were Pixar-type movies or Shrek-type movies or things like that, director Brad Bird decided he wanted to make an old-school, hand-drawn animated movie, and unfortunately, it didn't do that well at the theaters. But since then, I think people now appreciate this movie for being a true masterpiece. Coming in at number 3, The Iron Giant.
Giant?
You stay. I go.
The Iron Giant is a delightfully visually stunning animated film that proves you don't need 3D or computer-generated graphics to create a masterpiece. Set in the 1950s, the story follows a young boy named Hogarth, who befriends a giant robot from outer space. The film is a beautiful allegory about fear, friendship, and the power of choice. The voice acting is superb, with Vin Diesel giving a surprisingly emotional performance as the Iron Giant. The animation is gorgeous, with a retro style that perfectly captures the time period. It is probably the strongest ending to any animated movie that brings tears to my eyes each time I see it, as well as a final scene that always makes me happy. I haven't had a Pixar movie on this list yet, and you know there has to be a Pixar movie here. I mean, Pixar kind of saved animation. It seemed like after the big hits of Little Mermaid and The Lion King and Aladdin that Disney just started stumbling with what they were doing, and people just didn't want to go see animated movies anymore. But then Pixar came out and just completely turned the animated world upside down. So of course, a Pixar movie has to be high on my list. Coming in at number 2 is my favorite Pixar movie, Toy Story 2.
Oh, you almost had him.
I'm never gonna defeat Zurg!
Sure you will, Rex. In fact, you're a better Buzz than I am.
But look at my little arms! I can't press the fire button and jump at the same time!
Toy Story 2 is one of those few sequels that I think is better than the original, and is probably the only animated sequel I enjoy that much. The film takes Woody, Buzz, and the gang on an adventure that's both heartwarming and hilarious. The animation is always as top-notch, with the voice acting being superb, with Tom Hanks and Tim Allen once again bringing Woody and Buzz to life. The most genius aspect of the movie was introducing a different Buzz Lightyear toy into the equation, who still thinks that he is real. But our Buzz is now in the position that Woody was in the first movie. It was super original and helps make this not only my favorite Pixar film, but favorite Disney animated movie as well. So here's something a little ironic. As I've talked about animated movies kind of being for children, and of course the better ones adults can enjoy as well, but now that I'm here at my number 1 animated movie of all time, it's rated R. It's a movie that little kids shouldn't see, although one of the many times I saw it on the big screen, there were some little kids there learning a whole bunch of new words. My favorite animated movie of all time is South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut.
Throw the switch, Mr. Garrison!
Hey, I'm supposed to be anonymous.
Goodbye, bastards! No!
I'd say that the first time I saw South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut in the theater, is in the top 5 theatrical experiences of my life. None of us expected a full-blown musical, and between Terrence and Phillip's song about Uncle You-Know-Who to Eric Cartman singing about Kyle's mom was a you-know-what, the audience was screaming with laughter and clapping along. The film cleverly skewers everything from censorship and celebrity culture to the absurdity of war, all the while delivering catchy musical numbers and unforgettable moments of pure, unadulterated silliness. It's a bold, brash, and brilliant piece of animation that's not for the easily offended, and is my favorite animated movie of all time. There's my top 5 animated movies. But now let's shift our focus to animated TV shows. We have all kinds. You have Saturday morning cartoons, you have primetime cartoons, you have Comedy Central animated cartoons, Adult Swim, all of that kind of stuff. So coming up with the top 5 is kind of difficult because so many are so varied in styles. But I did my best to try to include something of everything, so you can let me know how I did. Starting at number 5 was a Saturday morning cartoon, but not one that I watched as a little kid. It's one I watched in college, in my dorm room, alone, with no girls. I don't know, maybe girls just didn't like a guy who was 19 years old watching X-Men, the animated series.
My greatest enemy, and perhaps my only friend. But I have waited all my life for this moment!
Wouldn't he do it for you?
X-Men, the animated series, is a classic cartoon that holds up surprisingly well, despite its age. The show follows the adventures of the X-Men, a team of mutant superheroes led by Professor Charles Xavier, as they fight to protect a world that hates and fears them. The show does a great job of adapting the complex themes and relationships from the X-Men comics, while still being accessible to younger viewers. The show's exploration of prejudice and discrimination through the metaphor of mutant kind is still relevant today, and the characters are well-rounded and complex. And the show's serialized storytelling keeps you coming back for more. And one of the most interesting things about this show is that it is now continued on an all-new show called X-Men 97 that completely picks up where this one left off. And like I mentioned, there is now this new continuation of X-Men the animated series called X-Men 97 on Disney+. I had a chance to sit down and talk to the supervising producer of X-Men 97, Jake Castorina. I'm a lifelong comic book fan, especially the X-Men. Growing up, did you read the comics or watch the cartoon?
Oh man, 5, 6-year-old me would be absolutely thrilled and not believing myself that I have this job. For myself, X-Men goes back to when I was a kid and Pizza Hut was doing those promos with the VHS tapes to get Night of the Sentinels 1 and 2.
Oh yeah, me too. I had those.
But that spawned my love of the series, which in turn got me to watch the show once it was officially on broadcast.
So what's it like to be on the show now?
It's nothing short of a dream come true. It's one thing to be asked to be on an X-Men anything, but it's another thing to be asked to be on this X-Men show, that X-Men show, right? And so to not only get to grow up to be a fan and be inspired by the show, and it's one of the very shows that pushed me to be an artist, pushed me to be into comics, to be a big nerd, to get to contribute to the long timeline that is the X-Men IP and the love for the franchise, and to be an official blip, however large or small it may be, but just to get to be an official blip on that timeline is pretty dang humbling.
I think one of the reasons why I related to the X-Men when I was a kid was because they were misfits. We were all kind of misfits, right? I mean, I know I certainly was. But do you think this is why the characters are still popular today?
I find that I think the reason why people love it and relate to it so much is because they can see themselves in a character. There's a character for everybody to relate to. And I think, when you have enough of these characters, enough people in the world can find themselves in the comics or the show or whatever medium they have. And that's what I feel keeps them coming back. Keeps them learning, keeps them exploring new POVs or seeing things in a way they haven't seen before.
Today on Gary Talks, we're focusing on animation. Can you tell me a little bit about the animation style of X-Men 97?
I would describe it as fresh but familiar. It's the show that you love and remember, but brought into 4K and in all aspects of what that means, from action to the way the mutant abilities are designed, to the way there's nuance in acting, to how things are edited, to anything and beyond all that. It's the show you remember, but also it's still relevant and modern enough to be out there and enjoyed today.
While I love X-Men 97, I think you guys nailed the look and tone of the show. Thanks so much for being on Gary Talks. It really is a fun show, and you guys should check it out, especially if you enjoyed the original X-Men, the animated series, there in the early 90s. It's on Disney Plus, and it's definitely worth checking out. Now we'll continue with my top 5 animated TV shows, and we'll stick with another one that I watched in college. But at least this time, I didn't watch it alone, as all of my friends would pile in and we'd watch it together. Coming in at number 4, Ren and Stimpy.
You are so stupid.
Am I?
Idiot!
Ren and Stimpy is a wild, wacky, and occasionally disturbing animated series that pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable on children's television. The show follows the adventures of Ren, a psychotic chihuahua, and Stimpy, a dim-witted cat, as they engage in all sorts of bizarre and surreal antics. The animation is unique and distinctive, with a style that's both grotesque and strangely charming. The humor is often gross and crude, but is also incredibly clever and subversive. The show was also notable for its willingness to tackle taboo subjects, and its refusal to talk down to its audience. While it may not be for everyone, Ren and Stimpy is a landmark series that paved the way for more adult-oriented animation. Now we'll move on to number 3. We've already touched on this a little bit when we talked about movies, but it really was a game changer for TV shows. It kind of took what Ren and Stimpy did, starting to make cartoons interesting for older people, and really doubled down. My third favorite animated TV show of all time, South Park.
You guys, guess what? What, fat ass? I've become a man. I started puberty, you guys. What? No, you didn't. Yes, I really did. How do you know? Well, because yesterday I got my period.
I already mentioned South Park in the movies section, but I couldn't leave it out here as it has been consistently one of the funniest cartoons on TV since 1997. Created by Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the show follows the misadventures of 4 foul-mouthed grade schoolers in the fictional town of South Park, Colorado. With its crude humor, biting satire, and willingness to tackle controversial topics, South Park has become a cultural phenomenon. While the show has a very simple animation style, each episode is packed with jokes, pop culture references, and social commentary, from making fun of celebrities and politicians to tackling issues like racism, sexism, and religion. South Park leaves no stone unturned. But what really sets South Park apart is its ability to make us laugh at the most outrageous and offensive things. The show's creators have a knack for finding humor in the darkest corners of our society, and they're not afraid to offend anyone in the process.
You know what? I have been here too long. I'm sick of making this stupid cartoon, and we're never gonna finish it anyways. Screw you guys. I'm going home.
Now let's hear from Gary's better half.
So today we're talking about animation. Do you remember why are you laughing so much?
Oh no!
So today we're talking about animation. So today we're talking about animation. Do you like South Park?
Not really.
That was Gary's better half?
I loved cartoons in the 80s. It was, you got home from school, you watched a cartoon, you had so many good ones. You had G.I. Joe, you had Transformers, you had Mask, you had GoBots. I mean, there were so many fun ones, and yeah, a lot of them were made to sell toys, but it was still great to watch on TV. I could easily have made a top 5 that was all 80s cartoons, but I wanted to limit it to just one, so I chose my favorite. Coming in at number 2, Masters of the Universe.
Very clever, you muscle-bound moron.
I tried to limit childhood favorites to just one for this list, otherwise it would just be the best of the 80s. But Masters of the Universe was always my number 1. The animation may be a bit dated by today's standards, but it's still charming in its own way. The characters are lovable and memorable, from the heroic He-Man to the dastardly Skeletor. The voice acting is top-notch. The stories are simple but engaging, with plenty of action and adventure to keep viewers entertained. The show also has a great sense of humor, with plenty of puns and jokes that will still make you chuckle. It might have been made to sell toys, but that doesn't mean it wasn't awesome. And now, what is the greatest animated TV show of all time? There could really only be one choice. It's been one that has been consistent for so many people's lives. That show is The Simpsons.
No TV and no beer make Homer something something.
Go crazy?
Don't mind if I do!
I mean, really, what else can be said about The Simpsons? It has been a staple of television for over 3 decades. With its sharp wit, lovable characters, and clever satire, the show continues to entertain audiences of all ages. I think it's almost like SNL, as it's been around so long, everyone feels like when they first watched the show was the best it ever was. But they're all wrong, it was those first 5 seasons that were the best. But for it to still be going today says it all. So we've talked about animated movies and animated TV shows, but animation has also had a very interesting relationship with music through the years. Over the years, there have been quite a few cartoon bands like Deathlock, Josie and the Pussycats, and Jim and the Holograms, and some of them even released albums. But none have had an actual hit song like the Archies did with Sugar Sugar.
Sugar, oh honey, honey, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you.
Not nearly as big, but do you guys remember that Beavis and Butthead actually released an album called The Beavis and Butthead Experience? It had songs by Aerosmith, Megadeth, The Chili Peppers, Nirvana, and many others, with Beavis and Butthead commenting on the songs. But you also had Butthead's duet with Cher, I Got You Babe.
I got flowers in the spring. I got you. You were my ring.
But if we're going to look at 90s animated characters who released albums, none was bigger than The Simpsons Sing the Blues, which actually hit number 3 on the Billboard album charts. Really though, no animated characters who sing are bigger than the Chipmunks. Of course, their Christmas album made them famous, but to me, the one that was coolest when I was a kid was Urban Chipmunk.
Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys, chipmunks.
Alvin. And then we have real bands who became cartoons, like the Jackson 5 and the Beatles. But the one that really stands out is the real band who we only know as cartoons, the Gorillaz.
I ain't happy, I'm feeling glad I got sunshine in a bag. I'm useless, but not for long, the future is coming on.
So while we may generally think of animation as it relates to TV and film, music has always had a love of animation as well. Now before we go, I have one more special guest to talk to. The star of Despicable Me 4, Steve Carell. Thanks for being on the show. You know, other than Gru, my favorite character was Maxime. Without giving too much away, Will Ferrell plays Maxime, this character from Gru's past who comes back for revenge.
As you'll see in the movie, there was a tipping point in their youth and the kind of the seeds of why Maxime hates Gru so much. And it seems very innocuous, but it just teaches us a lesson that even the most innocuous things can really affect a person down the road. And it certainly has done that with Maxime.
One of the things I really loved about Despicable Me 4 was the relationship, or lack thereof, between Gru and Gru Jr.
It's such a beautiful animation because the timing of it is kind of impeccable. It's hard to time things comedically so well as in real life, let alone do it in a film. And the writers, editors, animators did such a perfect job. Yes, Gru Jr. is a chip off the old block, but boy, he does not like the old block to start with.
Yeah, but the good thing about this series is that we know that the characters grow. I mean, just look at where Gru began.
I give the writers a lot of credit for that arc. I give them all the credit for that arc because in each movie they've been able to tap into a different part of Gru's character and Lucy's character to kind of examine, without getting too heavy with it, examine the themes of family and relationships and love and commitment. So I think all of those things feel very real. And the fact that this guy started in one place and these children really changed his life and changed who he was intrinsically. And since then, we've seen him kind of fight against himself in becoming this better person. So I think there's a really nice moral to it all.
Well, that's my 5 minutes. Thanks for being on the show, Steve.
Thanks, appreciate it.
That's all the time we have this week. I know with animation, like so many things, it's so subjective, and especially trying to limit it to 5 in movies and TV shows, I know I left off a lot of your favorites. You should let me know what I got wrong, what I got right, what you agree with, and what you disagree with. Well, how should you do that? Go to GaryTalks.tv. That has links to all my socials. You can find me, send me messages. I've got audio versions of podcasts. I post uncut versions of these shows on YouTube, Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it now, and all those things. So find me on GaryTalks.tv. And join me right here next week for another episode of Gary Talks. See you then.
From capes to tapes, Gary's on the case. He's breaking down each scene, every place. On Gary Talks, he's quick with his peculiar wit. From plot twists to the comic strips, Gary's